And we welcome you back on what is supposed to be a happier note. Lobola is an intrinsic part of getting married for many South Africans. But how legally binding is this practice on its own, in terms of South African law, that is? John Manyike is the head of financial education at Old Mutual. He says it's important for South Africans to know the relationship between Lobola and a legal marriage contract in order to protect yourself in case the relationship breaks down. He's in studio with us and to tell us a bit more about this. John, when the uncles say Lobola has been paid,
Yes.
it's not really true.
It's actually one of the steps towards getting married under customary law.
Right. And what happens in the case of a partner passing away? So someone comes home, they pay Lobola, and touch wood, something happens tomorrow and the partner is no longer alive. Can you prove in a court of law that indeed you were married just from Lobola being paid?
Yeah, you see, customary law marriages are actually governed by the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act. And that law is very clear on what constitutes a customary law marriage. So one, there must be prospective spouses above the age of 18 who have an intention to marry under customary law, who must have a negotiated marriage. So in other words, there must be a Lobola negotiation, which over and above the Lobola negotiation, there must be a celebration. It must be celebrated in accordance with customary law. Now, if you have not done the celebration, you have not followed those traditional processes to the latter, things like the incorporation of the bride, the welcoming of the bride, the exchanging of blankets, and so on. Those things are so crucial. The law is very clear that if you have not celebrated that marriage, you have not fulfilled the legal requirements of a customary law marriage.
So it's not enough to stop Lobola. You actually have to have that celebration.
100%. Actually, if you have a Lobola letter and you have not followed through with the celebration, you actually have the same status as couples who are cohabiting if you've decided to move in together after the Lobola negotiation, because you have not fulfilled the entire process. So going back to your question, so if one of the parties passes away, you're going to have serious difficulties enforcing your rights, because remember, a customary law marriage amounts to a marriage in communal property. So you have equal rights, your share in the assets and liabilities and so on. Now, it is important to register that marriage with Home Affairs. However, if you don't register your customary law marriage with Home Affairs, it does not necessarily mean that it is invalid. However, that marriage certificate that you get from Home Affairs post the Lobola negotiation that is celebrated, at least you have a document, a legal document that will assist you to enforce your legal rights in the event of death or in the event of a dissolution of the marriage.
How important is a will in any circumstances, but more especially this? So when you don't have money for a celebration and you can only pay Lobola for now and you want to do that a little bit later, but unforeseen circumstances pop up, you either break up or someone passes away.
Yeah, so a will is very important because it gives you an opportunity to express your wishes in terms of how you want your assets to be distributed after your death. So if you don't have a will, then the state would have to appoint an executor. And again, your preferences in terms of who must be the beneficiary or how your assets must be distributed will not be honored because it is not known.
Curious to find out how many cases you actually deal with where people come and say, well, he paid Lobola and so I have a right to some of his estate.
I mean, most of those disputes find their way to courts, and our courts have been very consistent. And judges in those cases have to exercise their discretion to some degree, but obviously they are guided by Section 3 of the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act. And they also get input from experts, people who are experts in customs, but also affidavits from family members, perhaps who were there. And, even those pictures on Instagram and Facebook.
They go somewhere.
Yeah, you celebrate, you post.
Let's talk about pension funds. So if your partner has a pension fund, he's paid Lobola, you didn't have the celebration, something happens, and you want to go and you claim, would you be able to at least get something if your name is on there? But what happens if he had other partners that you didn't even know about?
Yeah. You see, when it comes to pension fund, there's a Pension Funds Act. Section 37C in particular is also very specific in terms of what constitutes a dependent. So there are factual dependents and there are legal dependents.
They're factual dependents?
So these are people who may be financially dependent on the deceased member of a pension or provident fund. So this could include, it could include a cousin. Even in some instances, I mean, if you, and then I know it's dangerous to say that, the sidekicks and so on, but that's the risk that you have, you know, because it doesn't mean that if you didn't nominate someone as a beneficiary and that they're not entitled to anything. In fact, the trustees of a pension fund or provident fund have a duty to investigate, to establish who are your legitimate beneficiaries. So even those kids that children that were born out of wedlock that are not listed, they are entitled, and if they establish that there are other dependents, they will ensure that they get something. The other issue which people tend to confuse with beneficiary nominations is that they allocate percentages, but it doesn't mean that the trustees will follow your preferred percentages to the T. They have to look at the degree of dependency, the ages of those dependents and so on. So you might find that somebody that you had allocated 80% might end up getting maybe even 10% because they have to treat each case on its merit.
These are small matters, but they make a difference when you're no longer there to actually enforce your will. Thank you very much, John Manyike. He's the head of financial education at Old Mutual, for joining us this evening.